Welcome to this comprehensive examination of colonial grain tax records spanning the period from 1600 to 1770. This presentation will proceed methodically through every aspect of grain taxation documentation in the American colonies. We will not rush. There is much to cover, and we will cover it thoroughly, examining each detail with the attention it deserves, which is to say, considerable attention. The colonial grain tax system emerged from necessity. The colonies needed revenue. Grain was abundant. Therefore, grain became taxable. This logic, simple as it appears, took decades to formalize into the bureaucratic structures we will examine today. Let us begin with the year 1607. Jamestown has just been established. There are no grain tax records yet. The colonists are struggling to survive. Many are dying. Starvation is common. This is important context, though we will not dwell on the dramatic aspects. We are here for the administrative history. The records. The paperwork. The slow evolution of bureaucratic procedure. By 1611, some stability has emerged. The colonists are growing corn. They learned this from the Powhatan peoples. The corn grows well. There is surplus. Where there is surplus, there is the possibility of taxation. But taxation requires organization. Organization requires clerks. Clerks require training. Training requires time. So we must wait. In 1619, the first representative assembly meets in Jamestown. The House of Burgesses. 22 members. They discuss many things. Tobacco regulation, land distribution, and yes, eventually, grain. But not yet. Not in 1619. In 1619, they are still establishing basic procedures. How often to meet? Where to meet? Who takes notes? These foundational questions consume months of discussion. The first mention of grain taxation appears in 1623. Not as law. As suggestion. A Burgess named William Tucker proposes that grain stores be documented. Not taxed. Simply documented. The proposal is discussed. For 3 meetings. Over 5 weeks. The discussion centers on methodology. How does one count grain? By the bushel? By the pound? By the wagon load? Each method has advantages. Each has disadvantages. The Burgesses cannot agree. Finally, in 1624, a compromise. Grain will be measured by the bushel. The English bushel, which contains 8 gallons. Except gallons are not standardized either. Not yet. not in 1624. So the English bushel means different things in different settlements. This will cause problems. Many problems. Problems that will not be resolved for decades. Let us now examine the first actual grain tax, implemented in Plymouth Colony in 1636. 12 years after the measurement discussion in Virginia. Why so long? Because the colonies are separate. They do not coordinate. Each develops its own systems. Slowly. Very slowly. Plymouth's 1636 grain tax is simple. Each household pays 1 bushel per 10 acres of cultivated land. This seems straightforward. It is not. First, one must define cultivated land. Is it land currently planted? Land that has been planted in the past year? Land that is cleared but fallow? The colony clerk, Thomas Prence, writes extensive notes on this question. 17 pages of notes. We will not read all 17 pages today, but we will summarize them thoroughly. Prence determines that cultivated land means land that has been planted with grain crops within the current growing season. This definition holds for 3 years. Then it changes. Why? Because farmers complain. If land is fallow for crop rotation, they argue, it should not count as cultivated. The argument has merit. The colony council meets. They discuss. They debate. They postpone a decision. They meet again. Finally, in 1639, they amend the definition. Cultivated land now means land planted with grain within the current season, excluding land deliberately left fallow as part of a rotation system exceeding 2 years. This new definition creates new problems. Now the clerks must verify rotation systems. Farmers must document their rotation plans. This requires new forms. The forms are created in 1640. Let me describe these forms in detail. The 1640 Plymouth Colony Grain Land Declaration Form measures 8 inches by 10 inches. It is made from paper imported from England. The paper is expensive. Therefore, the forms are reused when possible. Crossed out and written over. This makes them difficult to read, especially after a century or two. Modern historians examining these forms require magnification and patience. Considerable patience. The form has 7 sections. Section 1 requests the farmer's name. Section 2 requests the location of the farm. Location is described in relation to known landmarks. 3 miles northeast of the mill. Adjacent to Brewster's northern boundary. This system works when everyone knows the landmarks. It becomes problematic as settlements grow and landmarks disappear. Section 3 requests the total acreage owned. Section 4 requests the total acreage cultivated in the current season. Section 5 requests a list of grain types planted. Section 6 requests the acreage designated for future fallow rotation. Section 7 contains the farmer's mark or signature. Most farmers cannot write. They make marks. Usually an X. Sometimes initials. Sometimes pictographic symbols. A farmer named John Howland consistently uses a symbol resembling a small house. We have 43 forms bearing this house symbol, spanning from 1640 to 1663. Then the symbol disappears, presumably because John Howland died. He died in 1673, but stopped filing forms in 1663. Why? We do not know. Perhaps he transferred his land. Perhaps he became exempt due to age. The records do not specify. Now let us discuss the actual collection of grain taxes. The tax is due at harvest. Harvest occurs in autumn. September through November, depending on the crop and the weather. The farmer brings grain to a designated collection point, usually a central storehouse. The grain is measured by an official measurer. The measurer uses a standard bushel container, except the containers are not actually standard. Danforth's report also discusses grain storage. Collected grain must be stored. The colony maintains 3 storage facilities. One in Boston, one in Salem, one in Cambridge. Each facility has limited capacity. In 1665, the Cambridge facility reached capacity in November. Excess grain had to be redirected to Boston. This required additional transportation, additional cost, additional coordination. The report recommends expanding the Cambridge facility, or building a 4th facility. In Ipswich, perhaps, or Newbury. The treasurer reviews this recommendation. He requests cost estimates. Danforth prepares cost estimates. This takes 3 weeks. The estimates include construction costs, land costs, ongoing maintenance costs. The total is substantial. The treasurer presents the estimates to the Colony Council. The council debates. They table the decision. They will reconsider next year. This pattern repeats annually. Problems are identified. Solutions are proposed. Costs are estimated. Decisions are deferred. Meanwhile, the existing system strains under increasing demand. The colony is growing. More settlers arrive. More land is cultivated. More grain is produced. More grain is taxed. The administrative burden increases proportionally. By 1670, Massachusetts Bay Colony employs 18 grain tax clerks. Plymouth Colony employs 7. Connecticut Colony employs 5. Rhode Island Colony employs 3. Across New England, approximately 33 full-time clerks administer grain taxation. This represents a significant bureaucratic investment. Let us now examine Connecticut Colony's system. Connecticut develops later than Massachusetts Bay or Plymouth. Connecticut's first settlements are established in the mid-1630s. The first grain tax is implemented in 1640. Connecticut's system borrows from Massachusetts Bay, but with modifications. Connecticut uses a flat tax rate. All grains are taxed equally. 1 bushel per 20 acres of cultivated land. This simplifies calculation. Farmers do not need conversion tables. Clerks do not need to track multiple grain types. The system is elegant in its simplicity. However, simplicity has costs. By taxing all grains equally, Connecticut fails to account for value differences. A farmer growing valuable wheat pays the same tax as a farmer growing less valuable oats. This creates perverse incentives. Rational farmers grow low-value grains. Why grow wheat if it is taxed the same as oats? Better to grow oats. Use the wheat for personal consumption or sale. Connecticut recognizes this problem by 1645. They revise the tax. Now wheat is taxed at 1 bushel per 15 acres. Corn at 1 bushel per 20 acres. Oats at 1 bushel per 25 acres. This differential taxation encourages wheat cultivation. The colony wants wheat. Wheat stores better than corn. Wheat is more versatile. Wheat can be sold for higher prices. But differential taxation reintroduces complexity. Farmers must calculate different rates for different crops. Clerks must verify these calculations. The administrative burden increases. Connecticut responds by hiring more clerks. By 1650, they employ 5 clerks. By 1660, 8. By 1670, 12. This pattern is universal. Every colony that implements grain taxation eventually builds a substantial bureaucracy to administer it. The bureaucracy becomes self-perpetuating. It generates work. The work justifies expansion. Expansion generates more work. Let us now discuss enforcement. Not all farmers pay willingly. Some resist. Some evade. Some simply forget. Enforcement requires mechanisms. Legal mechanisms. Administrative mechanisms. Physical mechanisms. The legal mechanism is straightforward. Non-payment is a violation of colony law. Violators are subject to penalties. As previously mentioned, these penalties are graduated. First offense, fine. Second offense, larger fine. Third offense, property confiscation. This system deters most non-payment. Most farmers pay. Eventually. But some farmers are unable to pay. Not unwilling. Unable. Their crops fail. Their harvests are insufficient. They have no surplus grain. What then? The colonies develop hardship exemptions. A farmer may petition for an exemption. The petition must document the hardship. Crop failure. Illness. Fire. Flood. Indian attack. Whatever prevented a successful harvest. The petition is reviewed by the colony assessor or by the colony council. If the hardship is verified, an exemption is granted. Total exemption or partial exemption, depending on circumstances. The exemption is noted in the ledger. In the notes column, exempted due to crop failure, partial exemption due to illness. These notes preserve the justification. Let us examine a specific exemption case from Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1667. A farmer named Jonathan Fairbanks petitions for an exemption. His petition states that his barn burned in August. The fire destroyed his stored grain. He had intended to use this grain for his tax payment. Now he has no grain. He requests a full exemption. The assessor investigates. He visits Fairbanks's farm. He confirms that the barn did indeed burn. He observes the remains. Charred timbers. Ash. The evidence supports Fairbanks's claim. The assessor prepares a report. The report is submitted to the colony treasurer. The treasurer reviews the report. He consults precedents. Previous fire-related exemptions. He finds 3 similar cases. In 1658, 1662, and 1664. All 3 received full exemptions. Based on this precedent, the treasurer grants Fairbanks a full exemption for 1667. The exemption is recorded in the ledger. It is also recorded in a separate exemptions register. This register tracks all exemptions by year, by reason, by farmer. The register serves multiple purposes. It prevents fraud. It provides data for policy analysis. It creates accountability. Now let us discuss evasion. Some farmers deliberately underreport their cultivated acreage. They claim to farm 10 acres when they actually farm 15. This reduces their tax liability. How can such evasion be detected? Through inspections. Each colony employs tax assessors. Assessors travel to farms. They measure cultivated acreage. They verify farmer declarations. They identify discrepancies. When a discrepancy is found, the farmer is confronted. Most farmers admit the error. They claim it was accidental. An honest mistake. The assessor records the correction. The tax is adjusted upward. But some farmers refuse to admit error. They insist their declaration is accurate. The assessor insists otherwise. This creates a dispute. Disputes are resolved through formal proceedings. The farmer and assessor each present evidence. The colony council hears the case. The council renders a judgment. The judgment is binding. Let us examine a dispute from Plymouth Colony in 1671. A farmer named Samuel Bartlett declares 10 acres of cultivated land. The assessor measures Bartlett's land. He determines that Bartlett actually cultivates 14 acres. 4 acres of undeclared cultivation. Bartlett disputes this. He claims 2 of the additional acres are not grain fields. They are vegetable gardens. Gardens are not subject to grain tax. The other 2 acres, he claims, are fallow. Fallow land is not currently cultivated. Therefore, not taxable. The assessor disagrees. He inspected the so-called vegetable gardens. They contain primarily corn. Corn is grain. Grain is taxable. Regarding the fallow acres, the assessor found evidence of recent harvest. Stubble. Residue. The land was cultivated this season. Then harvested. Now it appears fallow. But it was cultivated. Therefore, taxable. The case goes to the colony council. Both parties present their evidence. Bartlett brings witnesses. 3 neighbors. The neighbors testify that Bartlett grows vegetables in those 2 acres. They have seen vegetables. Carrots. Turnips. Some corn, yes. But mostly vegetables. The assessor presents physical evidence. Corn husks collected from the disputed acres. He also presents a calculation. If those acres were truly vegetable gardens, Bartlett's household would be consuming an implausible quantity of vegetables. The assessor estimates that the 2 acres could produce approximately 1,000 pounds of vegetables. Bartlett's household has 6 members. That would be over 160 pounds of vegetables per person per season. Unlikely. The council deliberates. They find for the assessor. Partially. They agree that the 2 disputed acres are primarily corn. therefore, taxable. However, they give Bartlett credit for the vegetable component. They assess the 2 acres at half rate. 1 acre equivalent instead of 2. Regarding the fallow acres, the council finds for the assessor. Evidence of recent cultivation is clear. Those acres are taxable. Bartlett's final assessment, 13 acres. Not 10. Not 14. 13. This represents a compromise. Bartlett owes additional tax. 1.5 bushels. He pays. The case is closed. The proceedings are documented. 7 pages. Filed in the colony records. This case illustrates the complexity of tax enforcement. Determining cultivated land is not always straightforward. Assessors must make judgments. Farmers may dispute those judgments. Disputes require formal resolution. Resolution requires time. Documentation. Resources. Over time, colonies refine their definitions. They create more detailed regulations. More categories. More exemptions. More procedures. The regulations fill volumes. By 1700, Massachusetts Bay Colony's grain tax regulations occupy 212 pages. Printed pages. The regulations are printed so that every town can have a copy. Consistency requires standardization. Standardization requires printed regulations. Let us now discuss the grain itself. After collection, what happens? The grain is stored. Storage requires facilities. We have mentioned storage facilities earlier. But let us examine them more closely. A typical colonial grain storage facility is a large wooden building, perhaps 40 feet long, 30 feet wide, 20 feet tall. The building has a stone foundation. The walls are thick timber. The roof is shingle, usually cedar shingles. Cedar resists rot. The building has few windows. Windows admit moisture. Moisture spoils grain. Therefore, minimal windows. Inside, the building is divided into bins. Each bin holds a different grain type, or grain from different collection periods, or grain of different quality grades. The bins are separated by wooden partitions. The partitions are sturdy. They must support the weight of thousands of bushels. The grain is poured into the bins. From the top, workers climb ladders. They carry sacks of grain. They pour the grain into the bins. This is exhausting work. A bushel of wheat weighs approximately 60 pounds. A worker might move 20 bushels per day. 40 bushels on a good day. at £60 each, that is 2,400 pounds. Over a ton. Manually moved. Up ladders. Into bins. The storage facility requires maintenance. The roof must be inspected annually. Shingles replaced as needed. The foundation must be checked for cracks. Cracks admit rodents. Rodents eat grain. Significant amounts of grain. A single mouse consumes approximately 1 ounce of grain per day. That is roughly 23 pounds per year. 100 mice consume 2,300 pounds per year. That is over 38 bushels. An entire farm's tax payment. Consumed by mice. Therefore, rodent control is critical. Facilities employ cats. Multiple cats. Perhaps a dozen cats per facility. The cats hunt mice. They are not pets. They are working animals. They are fed minimally. They must hunt to eat. This keeps them motivated. Even with cats, some grain loss is inevitable. Grain also spoils naturally. Moisture causes mold. Mold ruins grain. Temperature fluctuations cause condensation. Condensation causes moisture. Therefore, facilities must maintain stable temperatures and low humidity. This is difficult, especially in coastal areas. Coastal areas have high humidity. The ocean is close. The air is damp. Grain absorbs moisture from the air. Some colonies build their storage facilities inland, away from the coast. Inland areas are drier. But inland locations create transportation challenges. Farmers must travel farther to deliver their taxes. Grain must be transported farther for distribution. Transportation is costly and slow. A wagon travel. Larger colonies fare better. Massachusetts Bay's extensive bureaucracy includes dedicated archivists. By 1680, the colony employs one full-time archivist. His responsibility is record preservation. He maintains the archive, monitors environmental conditions, repairs damaged ledgers. His work ensures that Massachusetts Bay's records survive. Today, we have nearly complete grain tax records for Massachusetts Bay from 1634 forward. An extraordinary achievement. Now let us discuss regional variations. We have focused primarily on New England. But grain taxation exists elsewhere. In the middle colonies. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware. Each develops its own system. New York's system is influenced by Dutch traditions. Before English control, New York was New Amsterdam. Dutch colony. The Dutch taxed grain differently. They used different units. The scheppel instead of the bushel. A scheppel is approximately 3/4 of a bushel. When the English take control in 1664, they must convert existing records. Scheppels to bushels. This conversion creates confusion and errors. Consider a 1665 record. A Dutch farmer, Peter Stuyvesant, paid 4 scheppels in 1664. Under Dutch rule. In 1665, under English rule, his assessment is converted. 4 scheppels equals 3 bushels. Exactly? No. 4 scheppels equals 3.2 bushels. But fractional bushels are impractical. So the clerk rounds to 3 bushels or to 3.5. Different clerks make different choices. Consistency is lacking. This inconsistency generates complaints. Farmers feel cheated. Some pay more after conversion. Some pay less. The inequity is obvious. The colonial government must address it. They convene a commission. The commission reviews all conversions, standardizes them. The standardization takes 3 years, from 1666 to 1669. During this period, grain tax collection is chaotic. Many farmers simply stop paying. They claim they do not understand the new system. They are waiting for clarity. Clarity finally arrives in 1669. New York publishes official conversion tables. Printed tables. Distributed to all towns. The tables specify exact conversions. 1 scheppel equals 0.8 bushels. 4 scheppels equals 3.2 bushels. Assessments are calculated precisely, then rounded to the nearest quarter bushel. This rule is universal, applied uniformly. No more discrepancies. But the delay has consequences. By 1669, New York has lost 3 years of revenue. Some farmers never pay their 1666, 1667, and 1668 taxes. The amounts are too small to pursue legally. The colonial government writes them off. The loss is documented in Treasury reports, marked as uncollectible. The total uncollected amount exceeds 800 bushels, worth approximately £160. A significant loss. Pennsylvania's system develops later. Pennsylvania is founded in 1681. By William Penn. Penn's vision includes religious tolerance, fair treatment of Native Americans, and efficient governance. Efficient governance requires effective taxation. Penn studies other colonies' systems. He borrows best practices. He avoids their mistakes. Pennsylvania's grain tax begins in 1683. It is comprehensive, well organized. It uses standardized forms, pre-printed forms. This is unusual. Most colonies use blank ledger pages. Clerks write everything by hand. Pennsylvania prints forms. The forms have labeled blanks. Name of taxpayer, acres cultivated, grain type, amount owed. The clerk simply fills in the blanks. This speeds processing, reduces errors. The forms are printed in Philadelphia by the colony's official printer. The printer produces 500 forms per year. The forms are distributed to county tax offices. Each county receives forms based on its population. Philadelphia County receives 150 forms. Bucks County receives 100 forms. Chester County receives 100 forms. Lancaster County receives 75 forms. The remaining 75 forms are held in reserve. This system is efficient, but it assumes stable population. If a county grows faster than expected, it may run out of forms. This happens in 1687. Lancaster County's population grows rapidly. New settlers arrive. More farms. More grain. More taxpayers. Lancaster County exhausts its 75 forms by September. But the harvest continues through November. What to do? The county clerk improvises. He uses blank paper, writes forms by hand, mimicking the printed format. He produces approximately 30 handwritten forms. These forms work, but they are inconsistent. Each is slightly different. Some have minor errors. A misspelled label. A missing line. These inconsistencies complicate later analysis. When the colony treasurer reviews Lancaster County's records, he must carefully examine each handwritten form. Verify its accuracy. This takes extra time. For 1688, Pennsylvania increases Lancaster County's allocation to 125 forms. This proves sufficient. Lancaster County completes the year with 15 unused forms. These are saved for 1689. Over time, the colony refines its allocation formula. By 1695, form shortages are rare. The system is optimized. Now let us examine the data contained in these records. What can we learn? Much. The records document agricultural activity. We can calculate total grain production by colony, by county, by town. We can track changes over time. Identify trends. Understand economic development. Consider Massachusetts Bay Colony. In 1640, total grain tax collection is approximately 1,200 bushels. This represents taxable cultivation of perhaps 24,000 acres. Assuming 1 bushel per 20 acres. By 1670, collection has grown to approximately 16,000 bushels, representing 320,000 acres. This is a 26-fold increase in 30 years. What explains this growth? Population increase. In 1640, Massachusetts Bay has approximately 8,000 colonists. By 1670, approximately 40,000. A 5-fold increase. But agricultural acreage increased 26-fold. 5 times the population growth. Why? Several factors. First, improved farming techniques. Colonists learn. They adapt European methods to American conditions. They experiment. They find what works. Productivity increases. Second, territorial expansion. The colony's boundaries expand. New towns are founded. New land is cleared. More acreage comes under cultivation. Third, economic specialization. Some colonists become full-time farmers. They cultivate more land, produce more grain. Their surplus is larger. These factors combine. The result is dramatic agricultural growth. This growth is visible in the tax records. The records do not lie. They are data. Pure data. Collected systematically. Recorded carefully. Preserved diligently. We can also analyze grain type composition. In 1640, Massachusetts Bay's collections are approximately 60% corn, 30% wheat, 10% other grains. By 1670, the composition shifts. 50% corn, 35% wheat, 15% other grains. Wheat increases. Why? Wheat is more valuable. It stores longer. It is preferred for bread. As the colonial economy matures, farmers shift toward higher value crops. This is economically rational. The tax records capture this shift. They document economic maturation. We can also identify regional specialization. Coastal areas grow more wheat. Inland areas grow more corn. Why? Coastal areas have better access to export markets. Wheat exports to England, to the Caribbean. Coastal farmers grow wheat for export. Inland farmers lack easy market access. They grow corn for local consumption and for tax payment. This specialization is efficient. It reflects comparative advantage. Coastal regions have advantage in tradable crops. Inland regions in subsistence crops. The pattern emerges naturally. The tax records document it. Without commentary. Without interpretation. Just data. Now let us consider the administrative costs of grain taxation. These costs are substantial. We have mentioned clerk salaries. But there are other costs. Office space. Supplies. Paper. Ink. Quills. Storage facilities. Their construction. Their maintenance. Assessors' salaries. Their travel expenses. Distribution costs. Transportation. All of these costs money. Massachusetts Bay Colony's grain tax administration costs approximately £800 annually in 1670. This includes all direct costs. Salaries, supplies, facilities. The colony collects approximately 16,000 bushels. At 4 shillings per bushel, that is 3,200 pounds of grain value. Administrative costs are 25% of gross revenue. 1/4. Is this efficient? Compared to what? Other colonies have similar cost structures. New York's administrative costs are approximately 30% of revenue. Connecticut's approximately 22%. Pennsylvania's approximately 18%. Pennsylvania's lower costs reflect its more efficient procedures. Pre-printed forms. Standardized processes. Better planning. But even at 25%, grain taxation is financially viable. It generates net revenue. £3,200 gross. £800 cost. £2,400 net. This net revenue funds colonial government. It pays the governor's salary. Legislative expenses. Defense costs. Without grain tax revenue, the colony would need alternative funding. Higher property taxes. Trade tariffs. Poll taxes. Each has disadvantages. Grain taxation is politically palatable. Farmers have grain. They can pay in grain. They need not find coin. Coin is scarce in colonial America. Most transactions are barter. Grain taxation fits this system. It is practical. It works. However, grain taxation creates administrative burden. We have seen this burden. The clerks. The ledgers. The forms. The procedures. This burden is inherent. It cannot be eliminated. Only managed. Minimized. Optimized. Colonies continually seek optimization. They experiment with different forms. Different procedures. Different organizational structures. Some experiments succeed. Pennsylvania's pre-printed forms. Massachusetts Bay's centralized master ledger. Connecticut's simplified tax rate. These innovations spread. Other colonies adopt them. Adapt them to local conditions. Some experiments fail. Rhode Island attempts to privatize grain tax collection in 1655. Private contractors collect taxes. They retain a commission. 20% of collections. The colony receives 80%. This should reduce administrative burden. The colony no longer needs to employ clerks. The contractors handle everything. But problems emerge. Some contractors are dishonest. They underreport collections. Skim more than 20%. Some are incompetent. They lose records. Mishandle grain. Farmers complain. The complaints overwhelm the colonial government. After 2 years, Rhode Island ends the experiment. Returns to direct collection. The episode is documented in colony records. Marked as a failed reform. This failure illustrates the challenges of tax administration. It requires honesty, competence, accountability, oversight. These qualities are easier to ensure with direct government employees than with private contractors. The lesson is noted. No other colony attempts privatization. All maintain direct collection. Now let us examine specific ledger entries in greater detail. We have discussed entries generally. But each entry has nuances, subtleties, variations. Let us look closely at several examples. Example 1, from Massachusetts Bay Colony, 1658. Goodman Prescott, 6 bushels wheat owed, paid 5 bushels wheat plus 1 bushel corn, October 22, conversion at standard rate, accepted. This entry shows mixed payment. Prescott owed 6 bushels of wheat. He paid only 5 bushels of wheat. He paid the remaining obligation in corn. 1 bushel of corn. But corn is less valuable than wheat. The standard conversion rate in 1658 is 1 bushel wheat equals 1.5 bushels corn. So 1 bushel of corn equals 2/3 bushel of wheat. Prescott still owes 1/3 bushel wheat equivalent. But the clerk marks the payment accepted. This suggests the colony accepted partial payment. Perhaps Prescott had no more wheat. The clerk used discretion. Accepted what was available. This flexibility is common. Colonies want to collect something rather than nothing. Strict enforcement might yield 0. Flexibility yields partial payment. Partial payment is better than nothing. Example 2, from Plymouth Colony, 1662. Goodman Warren, 4 bushels corn owed, paid 4 bushels 1 peck corn, October 19th, overpayment noted, credit applied to 1663 assessment. Warren overpaid. He owed 4 bushels. He paid 4 bushels and 1 peck. 1 peck is 1/4 bushel. Why did he overpay? We can speculate. Perhaps his measurement was imprecise. Perhaps he preferred to overpay slightly. Ensure full compliance. Avoid any dispute. The clerk notes the overpayment. Credits it toward next year's assessment. Warren will owe 1 peck less in 1663. This credit system is standard. It accommodates overpayments, underpayments, keeps accounts balanced. Across years. No single year's account must perfectly balance. The rolling credits and debits even out over time. Example 3, from Connecticut Colony, 1665. Goodman Steel, 3 bushels wheat owed, paid 0, November 30th, non-payment, fine assessed 1 bushel, total due 1664, 4 bushels. Steel did not pay. This is his first offense. He is fined 1 bushel. Next year, he owes his regular assessment plus the fine plus the unpaid amount from this year. If his regular 1664 assessment is 3 bushels, he now owes 3 plus 1 fine plus 3 unpaid. 7 bushels total. This penalty is severe. It encourages compliance. Most farmers avoid non-payment. The consequences are punitive. Example 4, from New York Colony, 1670. Jan van der Meer, 2.5 bushels wheat owed, paid 2.5 bushels wheat, September 15th, payment early, notation only. Van der Meer paid early. Most farmers pay in October or November. After harvest. Van der Meer paid in September. Perhaps he had stored grain from previous harvest. Or he harvested early. The clerk notes this. Payment early. This is unusual enough to merit notation. But there is no reward for early payment. No discount. No credit. Simply notation. Early payment is acceptable, but not incentivized. These examples illustrate the variety within ledger entries. Each entry tells a small story. A farmer's circumstances. His choices. The clerk's judgment. The colony's policies. Thousands of such entries exist. Each unique. Each routine. Together, they form a comprehensive record. Of agriculture. Of taxation. Of daily life in colonial America. Now let us discuss penmanship. We have mentioned that colonial clerks write in secretary hand. But within this style, individual variation exists. Each clerk has distinctive handwriting. Some write large, some small, some with heavy strokes, some light, some carefully, some hastily. Thomas Prence, Plymouth Colony's clerk from 1636 to 1657, writes in large, careful script. His letters are clearly formed, well spaced. His entries are easy to read, even 300 years later. This reflects his personality. Prence is meticulous, detail-oriented. He takes pride in his work. His handwriting shows this. In contrast, William Aspinwall, Massachusetts Bay's clerk from 1640 to 1651, writes hastily. His letters are cramped, compressed. He writes small to fit more entries per page. This saves paper, but it makes reading difficult. Modern researchers struggle with Aspinwall's entries. They require magnification, careful study. Aspinwall prioritized efficiency over legibility. His handwriting reflects this priority. By studying handwriting, we can sometimes identify unsigned entries. A researcher examining a ledger might encounter an entry without a clerk's signature. By comparing the handwriting to known samples, the clerk can be identified. This is important. It establishes provenance, authenticates the record, provides context. For example, a 1647 Massachusetts Bay ledger contains 23 entries. 20 are signed by Aspinwall. 3 are unsigned. But the handwriting matches Aspinwall's distinctive cramped style. Therefore, scholars attribute all 23 entries to Aspinwall. The unsigned entries were simply oversights. Aspinwall forgot to sign. His handwriting, however, identifies him. Handwriting analysis also reveals when multiple clerks worked on the same ledger. A ledger might contain entries in 3 different hands. This suggests 3 clerks contributed. Perhaps a senior clerk and 2 assistants. Or a clerk who became ill. His replacement finished the ledger. These transitions are historically significant. They might correspond to administrative changes, personnel turnover, policy shifts. The study of colonial handwriting is a specialized field. Paleography. Paleographers train for years. They learn to read secretary hand, identify individual hands, date documents based on handwriting style. Their work is essential. Without paleographers, many colonial records would remain illegible, inaccessible. The information would be lost. Now let us return to the grain itself. After collection and storage, what happens? We discussed distribution. But let us examine this more closely, particularly military distribution. Colonial militias require provisions. Soldiers must eat. When the militia musters for training or defense, the colony provides food. Grain is a staple. Each soldier receives a daily grain ration. The ration size varies by colony and by period, but typically, it is approximately 1 pound of grain per day. This is enough for bread, plus some porridge. 1 pound per day equals approximately 7 pounds per week, 28 pounds per month, 336 pounds per year. A bushel of wheat weighs 60 pounds. So one soldier consumes approximately 5.6 bushels per year. A militia company of 50 soldiers consumes 280 bushels per year. Massachusetts Bay maintains 3 militia companies in 1660. 150 soldiers total. They consume approximately 840 bushels per year. This is significant. It represents approximately 5% of total grain tax collections. 1/20. Not insignificant. But militia provision is necessary. Colonists face threats. Native American conflicts. Potential European invasions. Pirates. The militia provides defense. Defense requires readiness. Readiness requires training. Training requires time. Soldiers who train cannot farm. They must be fed. The colony feeds them. From grain tax reserves. This creates a feedback loop. Grain taxes fund defense. Defense enables stable agriculture. Stable agriculture generates grain taxes. The system is self-reinforcing. As long as it remains balanced. But imbalances occur. During King Philip's War, 1675 to 1678, Massachusetts Bay's militia mobilizes extensively. Instead of 3 companies, the colony fields 10 companies. 500 soldiers. Full-time. For 3 years. Their grain consumption is enormous. Approximately 2,800 bushels per year. 8,400 bushels total over 3 years. This exceeds normal military consumption by a factor of 10. The colony's grain reserves are strained. Collections continue. But distribution outpaces collection. By 1677, reserves are dangerously low. The colony considers emergency measures. Requisitioning grain from farmers. Above normal tax levels. Or purchasing grain at premium prices. Using coin from other revenue sources. The colony chooses the latter. They purchase grain. at 5 shillings per bushel. 1 shilling above normal market rate. Farmers respond. The colony chooses the latter. They purchase grain at 5 shillings per bushel. 1 shilling above normal market rate. Farmers respond. They sell voluntarily. No forced requisitions needed. The colony acquires approximately 1,500 bushels through emergency purchases. This covers the shortfall. Barely. The cost is substantial. 1,500 bushels at 5 shillings. 375 pounds. The colony's annual budget is approximately £2,000. This represents nearly 19% of the budget. For 1 year. The war lasts 3 years. Emergency grain purchases cost over £1,000 total. Half the annual budget. For 3 years. This expenditure strains colonial finances. Other programs are cut. Infrastructure projects delayed. Salaries reduced. The war's cost extends beyond immediate military expenses. It disrupts the entire economic system, including grain taxation and distribution. After the war, the colony slowly recovers. Grain reserves are rebuilt. Over several years. By 1682, reserves return to pre-war levels. Approximately 3,000 bushels. Enough for 1 year of normal operations. Plus a modest emergency reserve. The system has stabilized. Lessons have been learned. The colony maintains larger peacetime reserves. Just in case. Now let us examine poor relief distribution. We mentioned Widow Hutchinson earlier. She received 2 pecks every 2 weeks. 13 bushels per year. But she is not alone. Massachusetts Bay Colony provides grain relief to approximately 50 individuals in 1670. Widows. Orphans. The disabled. The elderly. Those unable to support themselves. 50 individuals receiving an average of 10 bushels per year equals 500 bushels. This represents approximately 3% of total collections. A relatively small share. But significant to the recipients. For them, colony grain means survival. Without it, they would starve. Or become dependent on private charity. Which is uncertain. Inconsistent. Colony relief is systematic. Reliable. Predictable. Recipients know they will receive grain. Every 2 weeks. Like clockwork. This provides security. Psychological as well as material. They can plan. Survive. Perhaps even thrive. Within limitations. But relief is not generous. 10 bushels per year is bare subsistence. It provides approximately 820 pounds of grain. For one person. That is 2.2 pounds per day. Enough for survival. Not comfort. Recipients supplement with other sources. Foraging. Fishing. Gardening. Small-scale labor. Whatever they can manage. The colony tracks relief recipients carefully. Each has a file. Documenting their circumstances. Why they qualify for relief. When relief began. Any changes in status. These files are reviewed annually. By the colonial assessor. He determines continued eligibility. Some recipients improve their situations. They find work. Remarry. Their children mature. They no longer need relief. Relief ends. Others remain dependent indefinitely. A disabled man. A widow with young children. They will likely never become self-sufficient. They receive relief for years. Decades. Until they die. The colony accepts this. It is the cost of maintaining social order, of demonstrating communal care, of fulfilling Christian duty. The records document all of this. Each distribution, each recipient, each decision. The documentation is thorough. It enables accountability. The colonial legislature can review relief expenditures, ensure appropriateness, prevent fraud. The public can trust that relief is warranted, properly administered. This trust is important. Colonial society functions through trust. Citizens trust their government to collect taxes fairly, to spend revenue wisely, to provide essential services, including relief. Without trust, the system collapses. Citizens evade taxes. Government loses revenue. Services decline. Trust erodes further. A downward spiral. Grain tax records help maintain trust. They are transparent, available for inspection. Any citizen can visit the clerk's office, request to see the ledgers, verify their payment was recorded, check their neighbor's payment, confirm that relief recipients actually exist, that they receive stated amounts. Nothing is hidden. Everything is documented. This transparency is unusual. In many societies, tax records are secret. Governments hide information. Citizens cannot verify anything. They must trust blindly, or not trust at all. Colonial America chooses transparency, at least regarding grain taxes. The choice strengthens civic bonds. Citizens see their contributions, see how they are used. This visibility generates buy-in, compliance, social cohesion. Now let us examine commercial sales. The colony sells surplus grain. We have discussed this. But let us look at specific transactions. Who buys? Why? At what prices? Typical buyers are merchants. They purchase grain in bulk, for resale, or for export, or for conversion into flour. A merchant might purchase 100 bushels, 500 bushels, even 1,000 bushels. These are large transactions. They require substantial capital. Only established merchants can afford them. For example, in 1672, Boston merchant Samuel Sewall purchases 800 bushels of wheat from Massachusetts Bay Colony. He pays 4 shillings per bushel. Total cost, £160. This is a fortune. Most colonists do not see £160 in their entire lives. Sewall is wealthy. He can deploy such capital. What does Sewall do with 800 bushels? He ships it to Barbados. Caribbean islands need grain. They grow sugar, not food. They import food from mainland colonies. The market is lucrative. Grain purchased in Boston at 4 shillings can sell in Barbados for 6 shillings. Even accounting for shipping costs, Sewall profits handsomely. Not all sales are so large. Smaller buyers exist. A tavern keeper might purchase 10 bushels for brewing. A baker might purchase 20 bushels for bread. These buyers pay the same per bushel price, 4 shillings. But their total outlay is much smaller. 10 bushels costs £2. 20 bushels costs £4. Still significant sums, but manageable for successful tradesmen. The colony does not discriminate based on purchase quantity. Large buyers and small buyers pay the same rate. This is policy. It ensures fairness, prevents accusations of favoritism. The policy is documented in colony regulations. Any buyer can purchase grain at the posted price. First come, first served. However, availability varies. In years of abundant collection, the colony has surplus to sell. Buyers can purchase easily. In years of poor collection, the colony has little surplus. Sales are limited. Buyers are disappointed. Some years, the colony sells nothing. All collected grain is needed for military provision and poor relief. Nothing remains for commercial sale. These fluctuations affect merchants. They cannot rely on colony grain. They must source from other suppliers. Directly from farmers. From other colonies. From England. This diversification is necessary. It reduces dependence. But it complicates logistics. Multiple suppliers mean multiple contracts. Multiple deliveries. Multiple payment arrangements. Transaction costs increase. Some merchants prefer purchasing from the colony, despite availability uncertainty. Why? Because colony grain is quality checked, inspected, measured accurately. Transactions are documented. Disputes are rare. When buying directly from farmers, quality varies. Measurements may be inaccurate. Disputes are common. The colony offers reliability, even if not always availability. This reliability has value. Merchants pay slightly more for colony grain. The 4-shilling rate is above typical farmgate prices. Farmers sell grain for 3 to 3.5 shillings per bushel. The colony's higher price reflects its quality assurance, its measurement standards, its documentation. Merchants pay for reduced risk, reduced hassle. The colony benefits from these sales. Revenue supports operations. But the colony's primary purpose is not commercial. It is governmental. The colony collects grain for public purposes. Military. Relief. Commercial sales are secondary. Opportunistic. They occur when surplus exists. They do not drive collection policy. This distinguishes grain taxation from profit-seeking enterprise. The colony is not trying to maximize revenue. It is trying to fund necessary services. Revenue maximization might suggest collecting more grain, selling more. But overcollection burdens farmers, threatens agricultural viability. The colony must balance. Collection must be sufficient, but not excessive. This balance is delicate. It requires judgment, constant adjustment. Colonial administrators monitor agricultural conditions, harvest yields, farmer complaints, market prices. They adjust tax rates accordingly. In years of poor harvest, rates might be reduced. In years of abundant harvest, rates might be increased. These adjustments are documented in colony records as policy changes. For example, in 1674, Massachusetts Bay reduces its grain tax rate from 1 bushel per 20 acres to 1 bushel per 25 acres. Why? Because 1673's harvest was poor. Cold weather. Too much rain. Many farmers' yields declined. The colony recognizes this. Reduces the burden. Farmers appreciate the adjustment. Compliance remains high. Collections decline slightly. From 16,000 bushels to 14,000 bushels. But the social compact is maintained. Trust is preserved. In 1676, after 2 years of good harvests, the rate returns to 1 bushel per 20 acres. Collections rise to 17,000 bushels. Farmers accept this. The harvests were good. They have surplus. They can pay. The system flexes. Adapts. survives. This adaptability is crucial. Rigid systems break under stress. Flexible systems bend. Endure. Colonial grain taxation is flexible. It survives wars, droughts, economic shifts, political changes. It endures for over a century. From the 1630s through the 1770s. When the Revolutionary War disrupts everything. But that is beyond our scope today. We are examining the period 1600 to 1770. Let us return to that focus. Now let us consider the role of grain taxation in colonial economy. Beyond direct revenue, what effects does it have? Many. Some obvious. Some subtle. First, grain taxation encourages cultivation. Farmers know grain is taxable. But they also know grain is necessary. The colony needs it. There is demand. Prices are relatively stable. Growing grain makes economic sense. The tax does not deter cultivation. It simply transfers a portion to the public sector. Second, grain taxation encourages surplus production. To pay taxes, farmers must produce beyond subsistence. They must generate surplus. This surplus also becomes available for market sale. For export. For non-farmers. This supports economic diversification. Not everyone must farm. Some can pursue other occupations. Merchants. Artisans. Clergy. Professionals. They purchase food from farmers. Farmers produce enough for both consumption and sale. Grain taxation is part of this equation. Third, grain taxation provides price stability. The colony collects grain, stores it, releases it gradually. Through military provision. Poor relief. Commercial sales. This smooths supply. Reduces price volatility. In bad harvest years, the colony releases more reserves. This dampens price spikes. In good years, the colony accumulates reserves. This prevents price collapses. The effect is stabilizing. Beneficial to all parties. Fourth, grain taxation documents economic activity. The records are data. Agricultural data. They show what is grown. Where? How much? This information is valuable. For planning. For understanding economic trends. For making policy. The records serve functions beyond immediate tax administration. Modern historians use these records extensively. They reconstruct colonial agriculture. Calculate production levels. Analyze regional specialization. Track economic growth. All from grain tax records. The records are primary sources. Reliable data. Systematically collected. Carefully preserved. They are invaluable. Without grain tax records, our understanding of colonial economy would be much poorer. We would have scattered evidence. Anecdotes. Estimates. But not data. Not systematic data. Grain tax records provide that data. They are a foundation of colonial economic history. Now let us discuss the end of grain taxation. Or rather, its transformation. Because grain taxation does not simply end. It evolves. Changes form. Adapts to new circumstances. By the mid-1700s, colonial economies are maturing. Coin is more common. Markets are more developed. Alternative revenue sources exist. Property taxes. Import tariffs. Excise taxes. Grain taxation becomes less central. Some colonies reduce rates. Some shift to cash payments instead of in-kind payments. Farmers pay money instead of grain. The money is used to purchase grain. Or for other purposes. This monetization reflects economic development. A subsistence economy requires in-kind taxation. A market economy enables cash taxation. The transition occurs gradually. Over decades. By 1770, many colonies are partially monetized. Some farmers still pay in grain. Others pay in cash. The system accommodates both. But the records remain. The documentation continues. Ledgers are maintained. Entries are recorded. Whether payment is grain or cash, it is documented. The administrative structure persists. Even as the underlying economy transforms. This continuity is significant. It shows institutional durability. The bureaucracy created for grain taxation outlasts grain taxation itself. It becomes general tax administration. The clerks who once recorded grain now record cash. The ledgers that once tracked bushels now track pounds and shillings. The system adapts. It does not disappear. The Revolutionary War disrupts everything. Colonial governments collapse. New governments emerge. Tax systems are reorganized. Grain taxation, in its colonial form, ends. But records remain. In archives. Preserved. Available. To us. Today. These records are our window into colonial life. They show daily realities. Economic activity. Administrative procedures. Social structures. They are mundane. Routine. Boring, even. But they are real. They are authentic. They are history. Not grand narratives. Not dramatic events. Just paperwork. Forms. Ledgers. Entries. This is the boring history we set out to examine. Colonial grain tax records. From 1600 to 1770. We have covered their origins. Their administration. Their formats. Their contents. Their preservation. Their uses. Their evolution. We have examined specific examples. Specific entries. Specific cases. We have discussed the people involved. Farmers. Clerks. Assessors. Treasurers. Recipients. Buyers. We have seen how a simple concept, taxing grain, becomes complex in practice. How it requires organization. Bureaucracy. Documentation. How it generates mountains of paperwork. How it employs dozens of people. How it affects thousands. How it shapes economy. Society. Government. We have also seen how boring history can be. Not boring as in worthless. Boring as in detailed. Meticulous. Slow. Thorough. The kind of history that proceeds line by line. Entry by entry. Year by year. Without drama. Without climax. Just steady accumulation. Of facts. Of data. Of evidence. This is colonial grain tax records. This is their story. Complete. Comprehensive. And yes, thoroughly boring. Thank you for your attention.